Hey gang, so it turns out I landed a bit further out from this bunker than I thought. So, I don't know, I guess this gives me a little time to think. So let's ruminate a bit. Let's look out to the far, far distant future. Let's look out to the year 2025. So, this would be a good time before CIG really starts getting back into the swing of things and rolling out their shows and locking down their plans for the year to talk about what I'm hoping for this year. Also set some expectations now that server meshing is at least mostly kind of working. That sound good? Let's get this. Okay, I feel dumb for having to do this, but it seems like my vids landed on some Star Citizen refund group's radar. So occasionally those people will pop in, and for them, these kinds of vids, they're not, I'll just say they're not predictions on my part. I'm not saying that this thing or that thing is definitely coming at this specific time or this year. These are just best guesses on my part. What I'd like to see CIG focus on, what I think they will focus on, and what I think has a good chance of coming in the nearish future, the next year or so. No one, not even CIG, knows exactly what will make it out of development this year. They'll certainly have goals, but having goals and meeting those goals are two completely different things, particularly in game development, and particularly when you're trying to do things that haven't been done before. That said, let's get into it. So let's just jump right into the face of that elephant in the room. I'm certain CIG is hoping to get Squadron 42 out the door, and I'm pretty sure they were hoping to get it out the door last year. But CR's obviously worried about a rough launch, and rightfully so. If Star Citizen has a launch that's even half as rocky as Cyberpunk's, this entire project could be in really dire straits. Star Citizen already has problems with getting any good press at all, and a bad Squadron launch might not be the final nail in the coffin, but it certainly wouldn't help. So do I think they were right to hold off on releasing it? I mean, probably. A fresh install on a new computer led to crashes at SitCon, so there's no reason to think those issues wouldn't be present on at least some of the machines users would have. Enough to lead to the broken game accusations, at least. So yeah, they're slow rolling it and trying to make it as absolutely as polished as possible, pushing that window out another year. And yeah, I know they said the launch would be in 2026, but I've also said before that I don't think that means December 2026, more like the first quarter if I had to guess. Either way, we should start having some indication on whether I'm right or not around June. If we start seeing advertising for Squadron 42 ramp up, it means the game's probably about 6 months out or so. We'll probably see a demo, just that first chapter we saw at SitCon, rolled out to the big streamers and maybe the public just to gin up some hype and support. But largely, Squadron 42 will release when it releases. CR won't push it out the door early, but there's likely some monetary and possibly some contractual legal incentives put in place by those venture capitalists to get it out the door no later than 2026. So why am I bringing up Squadron 42? Well, at this point in the project, Squadron 42 development has guided and dominated development on the entire project, often shoving the persistent universe onto the back burner. CIG is now obviously undergoing a huge realignment, and it's now been confirmed that there's been some pretty big shakeups going up in upper management. The reasons why are all up for speculation. I mean, it could be just that people don't like living in the UK, don't like being as far away from their family, just wanting to switch careers after working at CIG for 10 or 12 years. I mean, this is a fast moving industry, and staying locked down like that is really unusual. But all the reasons why are up for speculation. But the timing would seem to line up with the switch in focus from Squadron 42 to the persistent universe. That said, with CR needing Squadron 42 to go off without a hitch, or with as small a hitch as possible, or small hitches as possible, it's still totally possible that any devs from any group are pulled off of their current PU projects to fix, polish, remake, or whatever, something in Squadron 42. Hopefully that won't be the case, but again, totally possible. Just keep that in mind. Until it's out the door, Squadron 42 will probably take priority for CIG. Yeah. I know I said this at the start of last year, but my hope then was that server meshing would bring more stability. And back then we all thought 4.0 was going to be dropping in June. I mean, you probably laughed yourself out of your seat at that, but we're at the point where 30Ks are just annoying rather than game breaking. Of course, I'd stopped short of saying that the game is stable now. That said, with them sneaking server meshing in at the last possible moment in 2024, my hope is that 4.0.1 and later patches will mean that we'll finally have the server monkey off our backs. What do I mean by that? Well, for a long time, probably around, I'd say probably 2016 or so, CIG has been pointing at the limitations in what a single server could handle as the logjam for this project. If you buy that, and I happen to, that's why the content we've had for the last few years has been more along the lines of making things prettier and more efficient. Things like building blocks, in other words, than content heavy. It's been more focused on delivering ships because if there's a single ship out there, it's not increasing the load on the server any more than another single ship. Think things like new game loops, the big new locations, big new mechanics, complicated ships. You get the idea. The servers just couldn't handle anything more. But server meshing takes the gloves off, and you'll notice that a lot of my hopes and expectations for this coming year, and years really, build off the idea that servers were actually where the logjam was. That doesn't mean there won't be growing pains though. Like this patch, for example. Really, the game's been in a rough state for a while now. I'd argue almost since like 3.18. So a change to something more stable would be pretty welcome. And speaking of, yeah, engineering was supposed to drop with server meshing, but like I said, I think close to a year ago, I really hope they don't drop engineering with 4.0. And now you can see why I said that. You see how server meshing has been a bear for the devs to dial in. Now imagine they are having to dial in engineering, which will impact literally every single ship in a lot of the locations at the same time. Yeah, that's nightmare fuel for the devs right there. While I really wanted engineering in last year, server meshing was always going to have to be first out the door and working. But 4.0.1 looks pretty promising so far, so maybe engineering by June or so? Maybe before that? Fingers crossed. In more than engineering, there's a lot of loops out there that have been waiting in the wings, either for devs to be freed up from Squadron or for server tech to get to the point that the load for the new loops could be distributed. We might see advancement on old loops too, things like mining and salvaging. The original goal for salvaging, for example, at least the munching part, was to literally be tearing a ship apart and having those chunks be pulled into the grinder. The whole dissolving thing was meant to be a stopgap. That said, it's totally possible CIG has decided that the dissolving mechanic works just fine, and the more visceral, physical munching might go on the scrap heap, so to speak. Mining might start rolling in the later mechanics that the Arastra or the Orion will be using. Bigger asteroids, that sort of thing. Speaking of asteroids, maybe they are in Halo? Or maybe CIG just dumped that idea when they no longer needed the artificial barriers to travel across the whole system. Either way, it would be cool to hear if it's still in the plans or not. And no, what's in the system right now is not what they had planned for the Halo. Other loops, passenger missions, deeper bounty hunting missions, hopefully the next stage of medical, and heads up on that one, hopefully I'll be rolling out a show in the nearest future on that. Crafting? Actually, that one deserves its own section. So crafting and building. I'm running on the theory that we're getting this early in the year. Obviously not the big station building thing they were showing off at SitCon. But then again, they're apparently planning on dropping the Pioneer at the end of this year, so who knows? Do I really think they're dropping big station building this year? No. No, I don't. But I do think we're getting base building pretty quick. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's coming pretty quick. How complex will it be? I mean, who can say? But I think they'll roll out the basic buildings. Maybe a place we can log out from, a landing pad, maybe a basic mining module. I guess that mostly depends on how well the early tests go, I suppose. I could also see some more crafting recipes dropping into the mix. For that matter, we should start seeing the first pieces of real recipes. Oh, and that's a good segue to this. This is one we've been seeing little shadows of for the last year or so, but not the full thing. But do I think we're getting Star Economy or Star Trader Quanta or whatever they're going to call it this year? No, I mean, probably not. But even a better faked economy would be nice. Hell, at this point, the whole super complex, everything's connected, dynamic economy sounds probably a bit more complex than it has to be. Would it be cool? Sure, but is it necessary? Or could it be faked in a way that will get 90% of the way there? I sure think so. Then again, when has CIG ever done things the easy way? Hopefully they do it this time. Either way, here's hoping they roll out more of the new economy and we start getting reasons to go places, start getting real reasons to haul commodities with lesser values. That would be nice. Just a reason for things to exist and tied into what a location actually produces and needs to produce those things. Okay, I think this one's probably one that'll be coming pretty quick. Again, I could be way off, but it seems like these kinds of tools have been on the back burner for way too long. Just organizing an organization in-game is nearly impossible, even on Spectrum. Even comm tools are better off being third-party. The VoIP features are kind of cool, but I hardly ever use them in favor of third-party versions like Discord or TeamSpeak, and I'm hardly alone there. The ability to log off on an org member ship, being able to have org ships assigned to people who aren't their original owner, the ability to give tiers of access. I think some of those things are waiting on hacking gameplay, but it would be nice if they rolled out the tools first, let us get used to them, then introduced hacking to break in and disrupt those systems. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but the stuff they showed off at SitCon looked like it was worth waiting for. Reputation is one of those things that's been sitting right on the cusp for years. There's some things that rep counts for even now. You can get better paying gigs, you can get more complicated missions, you can get access to better loot from those more complicated missions. But there should be way more. If what CIG has told us over the years, they've got some plans for rep that they just haven't kicked into gear. Like a lot of these things, maybe the servers are the big blocker from implementing them. Anyway, what would be a good thing to see if the servers are finally turning that corner is some of those rep loops starting to bear fruit. More than just higher paying missions, there's been suggestions that rep would start to matter a lot more. Who you run with and against would and should really start to matter. Even on the lawful side of things, there's a chance that, if not adversarial, there might be some competition going on. Run a bunch of missions for the Hurstons, maybe have to climb the hill just a little bit higher to convince Crusader security you aren't a corpo for the other team. That sort of thing. And rep should start to matter a ton more in the lawless areas. In civilized areas, civilization carries a lot of weight for rep. You can be a crappy person, but if you pay your bills and not break the law too obviously, you're probably fine. But in lawless areas, rep should carry a lot more weight. Your reputation really is your currency. If a gang feels like it's being disrespected, it can't allow that. Gankers sitting off one of their stations, blowing up everyone as they land or leave, yeah, that'll leave you up on their list pretty quick. Their death list. Their death list. Because they're gonna kill you, I guess I'm saying. They'll, well, I guess that's pretty obvious. Anyways, where were we? Right, rep. Rep should start to matter with jobs and even other players. You should be able to look at another player's rep and see if they're actually a good fit to ride in your turret, or if a lot of other ships they've crewed on have gotten lost in transit. Rep should matter a ton with guilds too, and people will need to start specializing if I had to guess. Or you could generalize, but the really cool stuff will probably lie further down the rep chain. And more than money, you might get access to unique items, armor, paints, probably not ships, but recipes? Yeah, recipes are definitely on the menu. But for this year, maybe the light version of all of that. I just want to see some progress, some steps in the right direction. The first steps into those guilds and org tools would be a great one to see. Okay, let's move more into speculation territory here. The previous bits were ones that I would expect to see some version of coming this year, although they'll almost certainly be in their nascent form. These next ones are long shots, but are at least possible. Mildly possible. Let's take a little journey, shall we? So a CIG dev finally said that maybe, just maybe, we might be getting larger plants. And yeah, I know, this isn't something a lot of you are clamoring for. But the size of the planets has always kind of low-key bugged me. Not enough to say that CIG should drop everything else and make the planets bigger. Just something that I'd like to see when I was in orbit, and then I'd sigh a little. Right now, the planets and moons are about, I believe, 1/6 the size they should be. It leads to a weird sense when just over a planet. Now, CIG hasn't said that they'd go 1-to-1 on scale, maybe half, maybe 75%, but for me, that would be fine. Just enough to throw off that Little Prince effect, which I've talked about plenty on this channel. Being able to easily see individual buildings or landing lights from high orbit, that sort of thing. So that would increase playable space. And one day when we're building our own bases and settlements on a planet, yeah, you won't want them easily visible from space either. But also, one day it might let CIG start filling in some of the gaps of the wastelands with towns and smaller cities. Or we can. You know, whatever. But more than just bigger planets and moons, there's another thing out there that's a little less speculative. The speculative part is more about when it's coming rather than if. Of course, I'm talking about building interiors here. You look around any of the major LZs, New Bab, Lorville, Area 18, especially ArcCorp, but that whole planet needs an update. And even Orison, you have these small zones where people can actually go. All those buildings, they're really just set pieces. They're window dressing, props. You might be able to land on one, but you can't go in one. That'll be changing eventually. Well, at least for some of the buildings, but even that would be huge for increasing the available areas where things could happen. Missions, stores, contracts, contacts, you get the idea. The plan, spelled out by Sitcon 2 years ago, was that building interiors would have different levels to them. The tops would probably be accessible by those landing pads up top, and those sections would be habitation. The next section down would be offices. The next section down from that at ground level would probably be shops. And then you'd have a basement that would be the sewer and utility areas. Think repair missions, but also smuggling. I mean, CIG's been talking about how smuggling would be a thing for years, and you can kind of see little areas, especially if you tour around Lorville, where they've kind of started planning that kind of stuff in. Right now, it doesn't matter because you can land at any LZ with any type of cargo, and unless security just happens to scan you on the way in, something I haven't seen happen in 4.0 or any of the LZs. It only happens at the stations anyways. If it doesn't happen and you're not scanned, you're fine. I don't think that'll always be the case. And eventually you'll have to land outside the LZ and find a way to sneak stuff in past the guard, security, and customs. One day. I don't think the latter is coming this year, but we might see some building interiors. Maybe some persistent habs to go along with them. So here's a bone CIG could throw to the PvEers and the solo players. I actually think passenger missions are coming before crew, but I think the tech for both is similar. Of course, I have an art degree, so take that with a big old grain of salt. But anyways, in my totally professional opinion as a dude who makes videos on YouTube, I would think crew and passenger gameplay would go hand in hand. Bonus that would finally give players something to spend money on. Now they'd have an actual reason to collect all that money, and something that would drain it rather than just making big ass dragon piles of coins or whatever it is they're doing and nothing to spend it on. Crew, differing levels of competency driving their value and their cost. But even if CIG can't get crew off the ground right now, passenger loops might be more doable. Not that I think CIG would do this, but they certainly could just have passengers appear and disappear off your ship. Of course, CIG will go for more fidelity every single time, so they won't put it in the game until those passengers are walking onto the ship, taking their seats, and going full-on Karen because their Mixomag drink wasn't fluffy enough. Will we get it this year? I mean, it's certainly possible. They had some sprints on that loop last year and the year before. Maybe this is the year for it. So, short one here, but we've had the same prison and prison loop for ages now. Granted, Klesher is a pretty good asset, even if it's broken in the current patch, but, I mean, Klesher can't be the only prison in this game, right? And there has to be more consequences coming with the greater stability. At some point, CIG has to dial in the balance of crime and punishment, but it still has to be a game loop that people will play. I've said this elsewhere, but people get a week-long crime stat and the prison loop sucks. That player will just go do something else. At a certain point, they might not come back. So prison gameplay has to be compelling, at least more compelling than it is right now. Players should get access to unique things, even while they're being denied the larger game. So unique rep, tattoos, contacts, missions, and so on. Imagine going into prison because you want to make contact with the gang that requires that as a prereq to joining or making contact with them. Or maybe just a cool Pico prison tat that you can only get there. Anyways, CIG needs to up their game in this area. Probably not this year, but hopefully we hear something about it at least. I mean, okay, I don't know why I totally put this one in speculation. We're definitely getting more critters and probably more with each patch. That's kind of a given. But hopefully we'll start getting new critters with more complex behaviors, perhaps interactions with each other. The Boreal Stalker, the big-ass Yeti that lives on Microtech, will probably be dropping in at some point, as will the Sandworm. How cool would it be to watch them hunting down quasi-grazers when they aren't targeting people? That's always something that really cranks up the immersion for me in-game, when you feel that the game world goes on when you're not there, even if it's just an illusion. Nyx. I mean, we've already actually had Delamar in the game once already, right? I think Nyx is close. Maybe this year close. Don't take that to the bank or anything, but most of the Road to Pyro stuff was just getting the server tech working. In theory, hopefully that'll be locking down in the next few months. Nyx should be spun up pretty quick. A year? Well, if they're going to finish off 5 systems in, let's say, 5 years, they're definitely going to have to start picking up the pace. Okay, so another elephant in the room. There's apparently been a lot of turnover at the top of CIG in the last few months. And at least some of that is in the heads that they have at marketing. Now, you can't fault CIG for the amount of money they've made. On that, probably more than anything else, they've been real successful. But some of their marketing tactics have been a bit gross. Maybe it's a long shot. Maybe it's the longest shot of this list, really. But my hope is that maybe some things start to change here. Not that I think they'll stop selling ships. They'll never stop that. Just that maybe they'll cut back on commodifying literally everything, like armor sets, and maybe finally give us the opportunity to color our ships the way we want. Not that endless stream of Joker colored purple and pink skins isn't cool, though. Also, I'm really hoping they start reeling in the whole save all the big stuff for SitCon. I'm talking about news here, news and information. Yeah, it makes SitCon a really big deal, but the info drought used to just be a couple weeks. Now it's more or less lasting the entire year. We're not getting any really big reveals during the year. Every single ship is a secret concept sale. That used to be rare. It used to be, we're making this ship, join us on a journey. Now it's just, here, we made this thing. $250. I guess I'm just hoping for a little more respect. I mean, they're a corporation, their job is to make money, but still, hoping. Well, until 4.0.1 drops, though, the game's broke, yo. You might get lucky and land on a good server, but honestly, most of the Carnival right now is off playing other games until the PU is in a better place. For my part, well, I was playing 4.0 almost every day, but lately the servers have been rough. So I might go do a Subnautica replay through until 4.0.1 drops, although I'm thinking hopefully I won't have time to get all the way through that game, right? I'm thinking that we'll probably begin this patch maybe by Thursday at the latest. Hopefully. Hang in there, gang. A lot of fun stuff coming this year. Or it should be. Fingers crossed. Catch me next time.